I don't know for a lot of you guys, but October 13th probably doesn't hold a special place in your heart. However, today on October 13th, 2019, it marks 10 years to the day since Uncharted 2 Among Thieves has been released. And I want to do a little bit of a retrospective on the game because it is really amazing to me that it has been 10 years since this game has been released. Time really flies, and I didn't even realize it has been 10 years until Naughty Dog put out a tweet saying Uncharted 2 Among Thieves released 10 years ago today on October 13th, 2009. Time has flown by. It felt like just the other day that we were hanging with Nate. And maybe for a lot of you guys, if you're a little bit younger, maybe you jumped onto PlayStation this generation, whatever the case may be, you don't realize the importance of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, but it really cannot be understated how important this game was to the entirety of PlayStation and for a variety of different reasons. And I feel like Sony has lost that a little bit. Uncharted 2 isn't remembered as this iconic game, but it absolutely should be. I think with some people that were there around, mid 2009 and saw the build up to the release of Uncharted 2 and the state of the PlayStation 3 at that time, they go back to the release of Uncharted 2 and understand how important of a game release it was. But hopefully I can shed some light to you guys on it as well. Going back to the release of Uncharted 1, that was all the way back in 2007. I think there's this misconception that Uncharted has always been this massive franchise, and Naughty Dog struck gold with it right from the get-go, and that wasn't the case. Going back to 07 again with Uncharted 1, it's not like the PlayStation 3 was at the point where it was easy to establish huge franchises, especially as an exclusive IP, just because not everybody was on board with the PlayStation 3. There weren't enough high-quality exclusives at that point. Yeah, you had Ratchet, Future Tools of Destruction, you had other games like Folklore that were good. Don't get me wrong, they were good, but the PlayStation 3 had a tough asking price at launch of $599 US. Nobody is ever gonna forget that. And yes, even though it did get a price cut in, I believe, sometime in early 2008, it was still a hard ask, and Uncharted 1 just didn't get the recognition. Also added to the fact that while Uncharted 1 was a very good game, if you look at the entirety of the Uncharted franchise, it is easy to see that Uncharted 1 is without a doubt the weakest of the franchise. A good game, but definitely there was room for improvement with that game. Again, still very good, and I believe IGN gave the game a 9.1, and I believe it enjoys in the mid to high 80s on Metacritic, which is a very respectable score. The announcement of Uncharted 2 definitely got people excited. However, it wasn't like the announcement of a game like Halo 2. Halo 2, when that game was announced, people were so excited. People were excited for Uncharted 2, but at the same time, it wasn't like this groundswell of hype that even a game like The Last of Us Part 2 has. Last of Us Part 2, enormous amount of hype for that game already, and that's the second game in the Last of Us franchise. Uncharted 2, leading up to its release, it didn't have that massive level of hype, at least not right away. Also very interesting about Uncharted 2 is Uncharted 1 didn't have multiplayer. With Uncharted 2, they were bringing multiplayer into the fold. Maybe that is something that they saw that they had to do, because going back to 2009, what were the biggest games on the market? You're looking at Halo, you're looking at Gears of War, you're looking at Call of Duty, all games that had robust multiplayer components. Uncharted at that point didn't have multiplayer, but with Uncharted 2, they were bringing that in. And what was really interesting is I remember the release of Infamous. Now you might be wondering, how are Infamous and Uncharted 2 related? Let me explain. The release of Infamous had a reasonable amount of hype attached to it as a PlayStation 3 exclusive, because at that point PS3 exclusives were not like PS4 exclusives, where a PS4 exclusive is just announced, and if it's a big budget title by a notable studio, it instantly becomes this massive game. Infamous was announced. It was a new IP by Sucker Punch, the guys that brought you Sly Cooper and of course are doing Ghost of Tsushima, and there was hype surrounding that game, but they really sweetened the pot by adding the Uncharted 2 beta with that game, the multiplayer beta. People didn't really know what to expect, but me personally, I was really excited for Infamous already, and adding the Uncharted 2 beta made me even more excited. Now keep in mind, Infamous, I believe, was released in May of 2009, so at this point, decent amount of hype for Uncharted 2, but nothing crazy, and everything took a turn for the better at E3 of 2009. That's where we first really saw a reasonable amount of gameplay for Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. At that point, I don't believe the beta had even gone live, but we saw the first reasonable amount of gameplay out of the single player component, and jaws were left on the floor. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, I can go back to that game as one of the standout E3 demos of all time that took a game from one level of hype and really raised the bar from a visual standpoint, even little things like the character dialogue, and then you have that incredibly iconic moment where Nathan Drake is hanging off, there's a chopper there, and you're just blasting your way through it. From a big budget standpoint, Uncharted 2 definitely had that right from the get-go. when you saw that trailer, when you saw that gameplay demo, you knew that this was a big budget title reminiscent of a big budget action movie or something to that effect, even more so than the first Uncharted. And that's when I noticed that the hype and anticipation for Uncharted 2 really started to elevate, and it was really important at that point that Sony started establishing these new IPs and new franchises that PlayStation as a brand could be built around, because going back to 09, Microsoft had already had Halo, they already had Gears of War, they had Fable, they had Forza, they had these massive franchises, and what was Sony relying on? Yeah, they had Killzone. Killzone 2 came out and it sold relatively well, although it was a little bit off-putting as they threw out that misleading demo, but whatever the case may be, Killzone 2 was received well. Infamous had just come out before that Uncharted 2 demo. That game was received well, but they had more work to do in terms of creating and establishing these IPs that are known to mainstream gamers. And Uncharted 2, I remember seeing that demo when I was 12 years old. Yes, I was 12 years old, just about to turn 13, and I knew from that moment, I was like, holy crap, Uncharted 2 is going to be a game to remember. This could be a game that gets a lot of people to buy a PlayStation platform, and that's exactly what happened. There were a lot of elements that came into play, but right before Uncharted 2's release on October 13, 2009, they did a lot of other strategic decisions. They cut the price of the PlayStation 3, they introduced the PlayStation 3 Slim, the PlayStation 3 became a more captivating option than ever, and it wasn't just Uncharted 2. Uncharted 2 helmed the lineup of PlayStation 3 exclusives in 2009, but it was surrounded by so many other major games. Again, February of 09, Killzone 2, followed up in May of 2009 with Infamous, and that came with the Uncharted 2 beta. And by the way, that beta was pretty good, and I personally was shocked at just the quality level of the Uncharted 2 multiplayer experience, because from one standpoint, I was like, okay, they're adding multiplayer, that's cool, but at the same time, I was like, does Uncharted really need multiplayer? But then that multiplayer turned out to be really good, so all was good. So again, you had Infamous in May, then that was followed up with Demon's Souls in September, then you had Ratchet & Clank: A Future Crack in Time, the follow-up to Future Tools of Destruction that I mentioned a little while ago, and then it was rounded out with Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Think about that for a second. We're talking about exclusive lineups for a year, and if you get one or two major exclusive releases in a year, you're pretty happy. I would say 2 is the standout amount. This year we got Days Gone, and we're gonna get Death Stranding, and you have a couple of other smaller titles to round things out. 2009 for the PlayStation 3, at a time where the PlayStation 3 desperately needed exclusives. They needed marquee experiences. What did you get in 09? You got a star-studded year. You got Killzone 2, you got Infamous, you got Demon's Souls, you got Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time, you got Uncharted 2. Those 5 games all in a single year. Think about that for a second. Could you imagine for a year on the PlayStation 4 that you get a new Ratchet & Clank, you get a new Souls title, you get a new Uncharted game, you get a new Killzone, and you get a Sucker Punch game all in the same year? It was astronomically crazy. And the thing about Uncharted 2 was that it was the perfect cap-off, because in the case of Uncharted 1, I think so many people saw the potential in that series. However, there were some fundamental flaws. In the case of Uncharted 2, it was a game that you could legitimately say is a 10 out of 10 experience. It's perfect in nearly every regard. The single player is one of the best-paced single-player experiences ever, has a great story, visuals were great, and again, going back to 09, you weren't getting a lot of these big-budget experiences. Nowadays, you've got Uncharted 4, you've got God of War, you've got Marvel Spider-Man. These experiences have grown, and they've outpaced Uncharted 2 in terms of being a spectacle. However, the quality level of Uncharted 2 cannot be understated, and that's why even in 2019, people will go back and say that Uncharted 2 is their favorite game in the series. People that have played all of those games as they've been released. Now, if you got started with the series with Uncharted 4 and you saw the brilliance of that game, you saw the visuals, and then you go back and you play Uncharted 2 and you see some of the more dated elements, yeah, it's a little bit harder to understand why people thought so highly of Uncharted 2. But guys, I cannot understate to you how massive of a game release this was, because this really started to turn the tide for the PlayStation 3, because let's be real, as good as the PS3 was, it was getting absolutely whooped by the Xbox 360 early on. But then, come the end of 2009, I started to see rumblings and the perception change. People really started to accept that yes, while the PlayStation 3 wasn't on the level of Xbox in terms of an online standpoint, these experiences were just so good. And by the time of 2009, Microsoft and the Xbox 360 were slacking a little bit. They weren't getting as many exclusives. 09, I think the only major exclusive that Xbox 360 really got was like Forza 3, and I think they got Left 4 Dead 2 that year as well, but that was on PC. And again, I just went through the lineup on PlayStation 3 in 09, highlighted by Uncharted 2, but so many other major games released that year as well. And then you really saw that perception change heading into 2010, where you had some other major releases. And then the rest is history, and the PlayStation 3 ultimately ended up outselling the Xbox 360, but I give a lot of credit to the quality level of Uncharted 2 and Naughty Dog as a studio for them establishing that the PlayStation 3 was home to these iconic, high-quality exclusives, these incredible single-player experiences, and I feel like Uncharted 2 was one of those games that really showcased that the Sony first-party team from Naughty Dog, Guerrilla Games, Sucker Punch, now Insomniac, they are at another level, and when they're working in unison, they can create some absolutely incredible games, and Uncharted 2 definitely fits the bill of being an incredible game, and it really parlayed into the success of Uncharted 3 and Uncharted 4, because if Uncharted 2 was another game that was at the quality level of Uncharted Drake's Fortune or even a quality drop-off, then I don't think the franchise would have gotten as big as it did. If the multiplayer component wasn't on point with Uncharted 2, I don't think the franchise wouldn't have gotten as big, but because of the quality level of Uncharted 2, not only did Naughty Dog establish one of the biggest IPs and biggest franchises in PlayStation history, but it also is one of those games that is pivotal, insurmountable to the importance of the turnaround of the PlayStation 3. Yes, there were a lot of elements in play. Again, the introduction of the PS3 Slim, the price cut, the introduction of all of the other exclusives were important, but Uncharted 2 was really the standard bearer in terms of a high-quality exclusive, and it was one of those games that really showcased why Naughty Dog is an elite studio. Naughty Dog was always respected. They always made great games, but after Uncharted 2 and with Uncharted 2, it was just home run after home run after home run. Again, after Uncharted 2, you got Uncharted 3. Uncharted 3 was awesome. Then you got The Last of Us. Then you got Uncharted 4, and they've just knocked it out of the park every single time since Uncharted 2. So I hope I was able to give you guys a little bit of an insight. Again, the importance of Uncharted 2, the release of the game, October 13, 2009. It was such an important day for Sony and PlayStation, and I do feel like that's gotten a little bit lost. So today, 10 years removed since the release of Uncharted 2, I thought it would be fun to do this video. Really want to hear from you guys. What are your memories of Uncharted 2? Did you play it back in 2009, or was it one of those games that you picked up later on? Maybe you didn't understand the appeal of it. Maybe you were an Xbox guy and you only got a PlayStation 4 this generation and you checked out Uncharted the Nathan Drake collection. I know so many of you guys are in that camp, and if you were one of those people that played Uncharted 2 by going back through the Nathan Drake collection or whatever the case may be, and you played it years later, did you find that same level of enjoyment that I'm saying that I had, and the quality level of, yeah, this game was a 9.5, a 10 out of 10, or did you see some of the dated elements and maybe you just look at a game like Uncharted 4 much better, or maybe you just don't think highly of Uncharted at all? All opinions are welcome, so definitely sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.